Frenchie.
Hell no, got the virus sorted.
Weeks at least.
Then we should...
So, I've been sitting with this for a minute, and I genuinely cannot stop thinking about one specific thing from times The Boys, times episode 4, and it's not even the most obvious thing. Yeah, Homelander getting closer to V1 and everything that went down around Fort Harmony is what everyone's talking about, but that's not what stuck with me. What I can't stop thinking about is this one specific moment where Stan Edgar is basically in the same room as him, and instead of resistance, instead of fear, it almost feels like he's times guiding, times the outcome, and Homelander notices it. But he doesn't react the way you'd expect him to. No explosion, no immediate dominance shift, just this quiet acceptance like he's already 10 steps ahead. And I think that subtle reaction tells you everything about where Homelander is psychologically right now, and it might quietly change the entire trajectory of the season. What really sticks with me about that moment is how calculated times it feels when Stan Edgar is in the same space as Homelander, and instead of pushing back, or he almost leans into it. Not in an obvious way, it's subtle, but it's there. Like he's not resisting the direction things are going, he's times shaping it from inside it asterisk. And Homelander noticing that, but not reacting violently or immediately asserting dominance, is what makes it feel off. Because that's not his usual pattern. Normally, even a hint of manipulation sets him off, but here, he just watches, he absorbs it. Like he's testing something rather than reacting emotionally. I know the easy answer is, Homelander is just more in control now. He's evolved past needing to react to everything. But I think it's way more disturbing than that. Because what if it's not control? What if it's recognition? Sit with that for a second. Think about it. From Homelander's perspective, someone who has spent his entire life being either worshipped or manipulated, but never truly times understood asterisk. In that moment with Stan, it doesn't feel like he's facing resistance. It feels like he's finally found someone who speaks the same language of long game strategy and quiet power plays. That reaction felt real, not performative, not emotional, almost curious. And if that's true, then this isn't just about V1 or power anymore. The real shift here is that Homelander might not just be becoming more dangerous physically, he might be starting to times understand the game at the same level as the people who used to control him asterisk. And that changes everything, because if he's no longer just reacting like a weapon, and instead thinking like the system itself, then the entire balance of the season isn't just shifting, it's being rewritten from the inside. Okay, but let me back up for a second, because once you sit with that idea that Stan isn't really resisting Homelander, he's positioning himself inside the outcome. It starts to reframe every other interaction in that episode. Because now, this isn't just about power moves anymore. It's about people who already understand the ending and are just deciding what role they want to play in it. Now, can we talk about Homelander for a minute? Because what makes his reaction so interesting in that scene isn't aggression, it's restraint. And that's not something we usually associate with him. Normally, if someone like Stan Edgar even suggests control, Homelander reacts immediately. But here, he doesn't. He observes. And that honestly makes it so much darker, because it suggests he's no longer operating purely on emotion. It feels like he's starting to process people strategically, not just react to them. Am I reading too much into this? Maybe. But think about it from Homelander's perspective. For the first time, he's not being told what to do, and he's not being challenged in a way that triggers him. He's being understood in a way that benefits someone else's plan. And that's where things start to feel wrong. Now let's shift to Stan Edgar, because his behavior is what really reframes everything. He's not fighting Homelander anymore in the traditional sense. He's not trying to outmuscle him or out-threaten him. Instead, it feels like he's doing something more psychological. He's accepting the direction of power and subtly influencing how it unfolds. And that connects directly back to that subtle detail, the idea that Homelander noticed it but didn't shut it down. Because if Stan is no longer trying to control Homelander, but instead trying to survive inside his rise, then the dynamic between them changes completely. It stops being predator and handler, It becomes two people who both think they're steering the same collapse. That honestly makes it so much darker. Because both of them are operating like they've already accepted that Homelander is going to win in some form, they just disagree on what winning actually looks like. Now I want to come back to something I mentioned earlier, V1. Because V1 isn't just a power upgrade in this framing, it becomes a confirmation point. If Homelander really gets access to it, then Stan's strategy suddenly makes sense. You don't resist a force that might become unkillable, you align yourself with it early enough to still matter. And if that's true, then what Stan is doing isn't loyalty or betrayal, it's adaptation. Now think about the boys in contrast. Because they're still operating like there's a version of this conflict where control can be restored, where Homelander is still something that can be stopped, rather than something that has to be outlived or redirected. But if Homelander is already thinking at the same level as Stan, not just emotionally dominating situations, but understanding how every move reshapes the system, then the boys aren't just behind. They might be playing a completely different game. And that's where it gets uncomfortable, because it raises a really simple question. What happens when the monster and the strategist stop being opposites and start becoming reflections of each other? Because if Homelander is learning to think like the system, and Stan is learning to survive inside him, then both of them are slowly erasing the line between control and surrender. And I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it. But that idea that they're no longer trying to defeat each other just define the shape of the outcome that changes how you look at every single interaction in episode 4. What really hits me when you step back from all of this Homelander, Stan, V1 the boys is that it's no longer just a story about who wins or who loses anymore. It's becoming a story about what people turn into while they're trying to decide who should win. Because every single thread in episode 4, when you strip it down, is circling the same idea. Nobody is acting outside the system anymore. They're just finding new ways to exist inside it. Homelander isn't just chasing power, he's learning how to understand control at its source. Stan isn't just resisting him, he's adapting to what that kind of power does to the world around it. And the boys, they're still operating like there's a clean version of this ending waiting for them, where the moral lines stay intact if they just push hard enough. But nothing about this world really supports that idea anymore. That honestly makes it so much darker, because the more each side improves, the less human their choices start to feel. It's not just about survival now, it's about obsession. The obsession to fix, to dominate, to prevent, to control, until the original reason they started fighting almost doesn't matter anymore. And that's the pattern this show keeps circling back, to people becoming the thing they swore they were fighting against. Not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, decision by decision, compromise by compromise. Think about Homelander for a second. If he's really starting to think strategically instead of emotionally, that's not just evolution, that's erosion of whatever boundaries used to define him. And think about Stan. If he's truly adapting instead of resisting, then even the idea of good versus evil stops applying cleanly. It just becomes different levels of acceptance. And the boys sit right in the middle of that collapse, still believing there's a version of this where the cost doesn't permanently change them. But maybe that's the illusion. Because the deeper theme here isn't just power or revenge, it's what happens when everyone involved starts justifying their choices long enough that the justification becomes the identity. No clean endings, no untouched heroes, just people reshaping themselves to survive the system they're trying to destroy. Maybe that's the whole point. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think Stan is actually trying to survive inside Homelander's rise, or is he quietly shaping it so there's still some version of control left when everything finally collapses? And with Homelander, do you think that moment with V1 represents him finally becoming untouchable? Or is it the exact point where he starts losing the last thing keeping him grounded in reality? Drop your thoughts below, because I genuinely want to know what you're seeing in this, because I honestly can't decide, and maybe that's the point.